Welcome to Nordic Talks Japan. Nordic Talks Japan is a series of events regarding the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how we can act to inspire and inspire to act to tackle those issues. My name is Niklas Karvonen. I'm Community Director at Nordic Innovation House Tokyo and here to deliver just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Today's event is a hybrid event. We have a big audience here at University of Creativity, our partner venue. Thank you again for hosting us, as well as many of you joining us online. Today's discussions will be held in English, but if you wish to follow the Japanese interpretation available, if you're with us on Zoom, please choose the right channel from the toolbar. Or if you are with us at the venue, you can grab a receiver from the entrance. Today's program will last for about 90 minutes. We will start with opening remarks from Tech Ambassador of Denmark, and then we will dive into a very interesting panel discussion about how to advocate for peace and democracy in the digital world. We also have some time for Q&A, and then we will close with closing remarks from the Ambassador of Finland to Japan. But without any further ado, let's get started with the program. On behalf of all the organizers, thank you very much for joining us today. And we will move on to a video message from the Tech Ambassador of Denmark.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to the Nordic embassies in Japan for the invitation to be here with you virtually today. My name is Anne-Marie Engtoft Larsen, and I am Denmark's Tech Ambassador. Thinking about technology and democracy, I see so many positive opportunities from new and emerging technologies. Take the brave young women of Iran. With nothing else but a phone in their hand and courage in their heart, they have changed and are changing the trajectory for their country and democracy. I also believe that social media, new digital technologies, can give us a new sense of global empathy. Not only do we witness what is happening in Ukraine, but we feel with the Ukrainian people. From the way that they're communicating to us, engaging directly with people around the world, we get a sense of their struggle, and it becomes our responsibility to help and support them also through digital means. And when I look at the Nordics, what has new technologies done not only for democracy, for representation, for giving voice to the voiceless, but also in creating peace and prosperity? We're one of the most digitized countries in the world, and that has given us unprecedented economic opportunities by harnessing new types of digital innovation. When it comes to the green transition, new technologies, they can both create movements online where youth are sharing their concerns about climate change and mobilizing for political action. And influencers can give ordinary citizens good ideas on how to live a more sustainable life. In short, digital technologies have advanced prosperity, security, opportunities, democracy, and human rights globally. But we cannot be naive, because these technologies also have a shadow side to them. They are used as oppressive means to crush social movements around the world from authoritarian regimes. Increased surveillance are used via our phones, via the internet. We see how cyber attacks on individuals, on governments, and on industry is taking and increasing in rapid pace. All that is to say, if we are to fully harness the amazing opportunities where it enriches our lives as citizens, as democrats, as individuals, and as nations, while at the same time mitigating the risk, we need to come together. And for that, the Nordics and Japan has so much in common on this agenda. I believe that our shared approach to right-respecting and strong institutions can have us be the leading partners, not only in shaping technology for the use of our societies, but for the global society as a whole. I want to talk a little bit about how we in Denmark has approached this question around tech and democracy. In Denmark and in the Nordics, we recognize the amazing potential technology has brought to democracy. And that's why Denmark has been pioneering on the Tech for Democracy initiative, a global, and now I want to say movement, where we have more than 200 partners across industry, tech organizations, tech businesses, leading countries, including Japan, and civil society organizations that together are creating a strong values framework for how we want to see technologies purposefully contributing to our democracy. We have more than 10 action coalitions where governments sit around the table with civil society and tech companies and try to find answers on some of the toughest questions of our time. And we have a new digital democracy initiative, a funding mechanism that will help those who are bringing voice to the voiceless and those social movements around the world who are needing and using technology to further advance human rights and democracy. Denmark is also now establishing a new think tank for the Nordics, looking on how to ensure that tech and democracy goes hand in hand. New recommendations are coming out from this Nordic think tank, and in particular focusing on how do we make sure that children and youth continue to be empowered and not left behind or marginalized with new technology. Before ending this, I do want to say that on everyone's mind these days is AI. I live in Silicon Valley, and every day seems almost exponential when it comes to what generative AI can do. It is up to us, the right-respecting countries like the Nordics, like Japan, to set the norms and frameworks for how we make sure that this technology, which is truly extraordinary, continue to benefit our lives meaningfully, purposefully, to lead to better, more sustainable societies, more prosperity, but in a way that is right-respecting and is respecting of human rights. So with that, I look forward to the conversation that you will have here today. I look forward to follow the G7 Tech Ministerial in the Gangnam province, and I look forward to a continued and deepened collaboration between the Nordics and Japan on this topic, because there is a world for us to win by harnessing technologies for better democracies. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Nordic Talks panel discussion. I'm very excited to be here, and my name is Sayuri Daimon, a journalist and a former Japan Times editor. I will be today's moderator. Today's topic is how to advocate for peace and democracy in the digital world. As the Danish ambassador pointed out, with the rapid development of technologies, I think that that's going to change our life drastically. And but also digital tools can also have both positive impact and negative impact. And also it can benefit peacemaking, like today's topic. So today, we'd like to explore this question. How can we use digital tools to advocate for peace and democracy? What kind of challenges and opportunities do we have in the digital era? To discuss this timely topic, we have three distinguished guests today. Unfortunately, Finnish Human Rights Ambassador Rauro Merisari could not come to Tokyo, but we have him online. I have to thank for the digitalization of this world. So yeah, we can talk to him as if he's in this room.
Yeah, hello everyone. I hope that you hear me very well, and really my apologies that I can't be there due to some health issues, but I'm happy that you have invited me to join this meeting this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, we can hear you very well. Okay, so first we have let me introduce briefly our panelists. To my left is Mr. Jakob Hallgren, Director of the Swedish Institute for International Affairs in Sweden. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
And Mr. Raula Merisari, Human Rights Ambassador in Finland. Thank you very much for joining us. And last but not least, Ms. Maiko Ichihara, Associate Professor of Graduate School at Law at Hitotsubashi University. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me today.
With this, let's start with a brief introduction of each panelist. Maybe you can introduce yourself and also talk about a little bit about today's topic, what you think about it. just maybe start with Jakob. Thank you.
As I said, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here in Tokyo, and we've actually met several times to talk before, so I'm really eager to discuss these issues and maybe also to interact with you in the audience about this. So as said, I am director of the Swedish Institute of International Affairs, which I think is the equivalence of Japan Institute of International Affairs. And before that, I have a background both in think tanks and in diplomacy. So I was Sweden's ambassador to Seoul, South Korea, up until 2 years ago. And before that, I was also the deputy director of SIPRI, which is the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. And I really look forward to talk about the issues of today, which harbors so many fantastic opportunities, but with some quite nasty challenges that we need to be aware of as well. And I think we will have some really good guiding questions. So I want to delve deeper into that right now, but leave the floor maybe to the next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Rauno, can you introduce yourself briefly and talk about today's topic?
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Thank you again for this invitation. I'm a little bit jealous to Jacob because it's my big dream to visit your beautiful country, but let's do it this time this way. My background and my angle to this discussion, they are related to human rights and democracy. So I work as the ambassador at large on democracy, human rights and democracy. I think I am also a colleague in the Japanese Foreign Ministry. I've led the development of the government's human rights report to the parliament, and the last report, which was issued late 2021 and approved last year by the parliament, human rights are issued in two fields of interest, which the significance is increasing and developing, and one of these is the digitalization and communications. The other one is, of course, is climate change and biodiversity loss. It's also my duty to represent Finland in intergovernmental organizations for democracy. Last year, Finland was the vice chair of the International IDEA, that's the Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. IDEA or IDEA new strategy includes a new work stream for digitalization and democracy. And we are happy that Japan works as an observer of this organization. And in 2021, Finland was chair of the Freedom Online Coalition, and that is the intergovernmental organization for internet freedom. And both Japan and Nordics are members of the FOC, and really encourage you all to get know more about the FOC's work for shaping global norms on human rights online. And moderator, if you allow me to very shortly comment on the address by the tech ambassador,
sure.
I can do it now or later, however you like to do it. Can I do it now?
Just briefly, yes. Maybe you.
Yeah, very briefly. Okay, maybe because I basically it was a good start, and I can sign her message. Maybe two things to add, that we maybe should not divide so much our policies and measures in the digital world on the other hand, and the physical world on the other. So these both sides must be seen complementarily. And the one point is, and that's my second point, is trust in democratic institutions and communications. So the democracy is as strong as citizens' trust in decision making and in their own possibility for meaningful participation. For instance, people shall trust in digital goods and services, and including their digital security. And my understanding is that, for instance, in Africa, one of the major obstacles to use digital services is to believe that it means control or surveillance by the state authorities or abuse for criminal purposes. So we really need trust in services and good both on and offline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Michael.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Maiko Ichihara, Professor of International Relations at Hitotsubashi University, Japan. I'm also a steering committee member of multiple networks, including the World Movement for Democracy, East Asia Democracy Forum, and Japan Fact Check Center. I have been deeply involved in this democracy field. And so we tend to talk about the challenges that we have been facing, democracy has been facing, especially since the mid-2000s. But well, listening to Danish ambassador's, talk at the beginning, well, she started, began with positive messages of how digitalization actually, functions to help democracy flourish. Well, which is a wonderful narrative, especially in this current, time of the discursive war.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you for leading this discussion. Actually, my first question that I'd like to ask, maybe let's start with the positive impact of digitalization. And so that like SNS or like, the digitalization can have engagement with the people. So there are lots of positive impact, I think. But I'd like to ask each of you, what do you think of this digitalization what they can do to actually, especially create peace and democracy, or maybe do some, help for election? Can you start?
Can I start?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, as I said before, I think this quite revolutionary paradigmatic shifts that we've seen with the digitalization, starting in the 90s with the internet and then with smartphones, and now we're on the threshold of artificial intelligence, harbors so many fantastic opportunities. It has made us richer. It has in many ways made us much more happy. It has connected us more. I would say that I don't want to steal the thunder from you all, so you will have to agree or disagree. But one thing which is positive is that people's voices have been heard in a completely different and new way. Who could get access directly to a politician, and who could sit outside a parliament and all of a sudden, after a couple of months, get millions of followers pleading an important issue. So I think better access to information and knowledge, governmental agencies becoming more transparent is another thing, which is, of course, important for democracy, because I think we're talking about democracies domestically, and then how we work with democracies in other countries, right? So we're looking at both these aspects, I think. And with this connectivity, I think more people-to-people relations are a result of this digital revolution. And I think it has led to more trade, and thus we have become richer, because there's completely new ways in which we are trading. I sometimes reflect upon the fact that people are becoming incredibly rich in professions that I hadn't heard about 10 or 15 years ago, which is quite amazing. And then I think we will talk later, I think, about the negatives as well. But one thing that also Tech Ambassador Anne-Marie mentioned is Ukraine. And there's, of course, a lot of terrible things happening there. But on the positive side, since we're starting with that, just think of Starlink, how Elon Musk provided access to all Ukrainians, both for the warfighting effort, but also for the people-to-people relations. That's quite amazing, isn't it? So I think I'll stop there. I actually have more good examples, but I leave some to the others as well, because we shouldn't forget about that when we're talking about the challenges later on.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you can jump in later on if you have more to say. Thank you for reminding me about the Starlink. Yes, that's right. That's a very, very positive impact. Thank you. Okay, Rauno, would you like to speak now about the positive impact?
Thank you. Yes, I can. Well, and I said the same coin has two sides, and we have to be honest and be ready to speak both about the benefits and challenges if we would like to be successful in implementing the digitalization. My example is about the um, citizens initiative, which is a new form of direct political participation in Finland on the state level. So the at least 50,000 Finnish citizens, that is about 1% of the population, who are entitled to vote, have the right to submit an initiative for enactment of act to the parliament, the Finnish parliament. And this process happens online with verified authentication. And the service is free of charge, accessible, safe to use. And for instance, our same-sex marriage legislation has been approved by this way. And quite interestingly, for this discussion, one of the latest initiatives seeks to ban the use of private smartphones in classrooms. So the initiator says that the mere presence of the smartphones reduce a child's concentration skills. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about this later in this discussion. And if you may, shortly about the peace mediation as well. This is one of the priorities in our foreign and security policy. We have contributed approximately 70 million euros to promote technology and gender equality around the world. And this means, for example, support to digital peace mediation, online security of women, human rights defenders, and the digital literacy of women and girls. And also our former president and Nobel Peace Prize awarded Mr. Martti Ahtisaari has founded Think and Do Think, that's called Crisis Management Initiative, and it has also developed different tools to promote peace in conflict situations. So, and it means, for instance, the digital security tools, non-discriminatory access to devices and networks, some way to increase the public consultation for peaceful solutions, digital literacy, etc. And CMI is currently developing a consultation process to map conflict drivers and priorities of the population in relation to peace, building more peaceful and safe and resilient state in Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting, and I actually thought that maybe we can hear more about this Nordic states, initiatives, because Nordic states are very much advanced, maybe compared to Japan in digitalization. So we hope to hear more about today. Thank you very much. Okay, next, Michael.
Sure. Well, digital technology is oftentimes called as liberation technology. And well, I myself believe in that. Let me take a step back in thinking about those positives and also the reason why it can be considered as liberation technology. In the current, in the international scene, we are embedded in this state-centered system, sovereignty system, where states are considered to be the main actors interacting with each other, and they cooperate each other, but also at the same time they also confront with each other. And but this state-centered approach makes it very easy for us to sort of think about about whatever issues in this dichotomous sort of way of either cooperation or confrontation. And this digitalization or technology actually empowers the citizens or individuals in this entire world in a way that they can actually make positive or substantial impact onto the international scene. I think that's one of the reasons how people actually can make the scene of the international issues much more complicated in a way that we ought to avoid having simplified sort of thinking. For example, right after, in the aftermath of the Russian aggression into Ukraine, the NGO called Squad 303 in Poland created this internet platform where individual citizens from all over the world actually can spread information about what's going on in this war to Russian citizens. So, by this NGO's work of creating this network or platform, individual citizens get involved to help the Ukrainians or in the country Ukraine to sort of fight against the Russians in a way that Russian people can actually have access to the truth, so that they try to judge what's right and what's wrong, whether Russian aggression is indeed something that they can support. And the same kind of thing has been going on. I think many of us know about Bellingcat. That's they use this open source intelligence where only a limited number of people or journalists or people from very different backgrounds actually get together online and then look for this picture, that information, that Google Map kind of things, and then try to match what actually happened when this, for example, plane clashed or things like that. So those things have been empowering us by both providing more information to the world and also receiving more information through the internet.
That's very interesting. I didn't know about the NGO 303.
Squad 303.
Squad
Yeah.
303, excuse me. That's actually a very encouraging, initiatives. And of course, I know about Bellingcat. It's fact, to provide facts to the citizens. So, would you like to add anything else?
If I may,
Please.
I got inspired by listening to you others. I really like the word liberation technologies, empowering people, because that's what it's about in many ways. And it just made me think about Greta Thunberg, who essentially started a social movement which wouldn't have been so strong if it weren't for the digital tools and instruments. And that has become a great force for green transition and to holding politicians account. And there's been many other similar initiatives. And a good friend of mine works in a human rights NGO called Civil Rights Defenders, and he told me once intriguingly how they are essentially handing out sort of arm wristwatches with like an alarm. So to human rights defenders in difficult settings, these persons are incredibly courageous, and sometimes they might be exposed to physical, violence. And if they press the button, that is immediately an alarm goes to defenders abroad. And then maybe the last example, which apropos Bellingcat, what is happening in Ukraine now is, of course, horrendous. War crimes are being committed. And we saw that already in the Syria conflict, how digital video clips can be used as evidence for future processes, legal processes, indicting people and holding war criminals accountable. Sweden actually has such a legal possibility to indict people for extrajudicial crimes committed outside Swedish territory. And I heard recently how the prosecutors there have their work is becoming easier because there is a lot of digitalization digital material out there. So these are positive uses of digitalization in difficult circumstances that I come to think of apropos your comments.
Thank you very much.
May I add just one thing? Yeah. I think one additional thing to mention would be the anonymity that technology actually allows us. In the current international scene, democracy has been repressed in all over the world, and people are suffering so much by the limitation in terms of freedom of media, freedom of speech, freedom of academia, and so forth. But this anonymity actually gives the people to spread the truth into the world via SNS or what have you. And so, for example, in Myanmar, people started this citizen journalism right after the coup occurred. And so, even when those journalists are repressed and not being able to, spread the news, people, street people can take pictures, share it on Twitter, and spread what's happening in the country. So this is a really powerful tool, I think.
Thank you very much. Yes, speaking of the anonymity, it's actually, there are two sides to this, because one is a positive one, like you mentioned. The other one is because of anonymity, there's helping out the spread of disinformation. Anybody can, maybe tweet wrong information, but it's really hard to find out whether they are, tweeting the factual things. So, that when we have a positive side, but there's also negative impact of the digitalization. And I'd like to know what you think of the digital negative side of it. Maybe I can ask Rauno. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I can hear you very well, and thank you, Professor and Jacob, for your remarks so far. So I must say first that we should be very careful whether we talk about the technology itself or the human use of the technology, and I think that quite often what we can do is to some way to promote or hinder the use of technology, designing it, how we control it, etc., etc. So this human side should be more considered. And my second point is that the human rights impact of the new technology are decidedly different between democratic and authoritarian societies. So the digitalization and authoritarian exercise of power entails a major human right risk, and we must combat these. Unfortunately, the list of the challenges is very long: violations of privacy, unlawful surveillance, discrimination based on biased data, etc., etc. I will talk a little bit more about the gender-based online violence and discrimination. Closing digital divides between nations and inside societies, that's vital. So globally, 69% of men and 63% of women has an access to internet, and there are very big differences between the nations here. What is particularly important in our case in Finland is to ensure the equal rights and treatment and inclusion and participation and access to services of older persons. So something only 20% of our population over 75 years are able to use digital services and have skills to use these devices. So there must be a ways to also to offer equal services, participation possibilities to those people as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listing all the negative things but then yes, that's very true. So, and I think we must be mindful that we need to have equal services to everyone. Maybe when I think about negative things, sometimes SNS comes to my mind. And Jakob, you mentioned before that the Swedish government has left Twitter.
Yeah,
do you mind talking about that?
Absolutely. No, this is a very recent decision. Last week, I think, that the Swedish public service, Swedish radio, decided to leave Twitter altogether. Because there is a sense that views are getting too extreme, and it actually creates echo chambers. Apropos the anonymity, it's easier to extol or pronounce views for which you do not take responsibility, views that you may not say like this, but which is easier to throw out. And I guess it's a reflection of that it's also a reflection of the way Twitter has changed now with somehow erratic decisions of the new owner, if I may put that a little bit diplomatically. Interestingly enough, that has already led to a debate in Sweden. Was that the right thing to do? Is the public service taking a political stance by doing so? But I think it's a reflection of all of the quite well-founded concerns.
So only the public service has
in this
left.
case,
and
it's
so
public service.
People in Sweden still can use it.
Of course, yeah. No, it is a voluntary decision by that company not to be active on and be present on Twitter any longer.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. It's an interesting development. Would you like to talk about the negative things that you think, and maybe what are the challenges, and also maybe how we can overcome, if you can mention that?
Okay, yeah, it's not that I want to talk about negative things, but yeah, just to mention. Well, I think, SNS has, made actually, if I put it this way, SNS opened up the discursive space, which used to be open only for professional journalists or academics or policy people to the public. Which by that I mean in the past, before the arrival of the internet, we had only like newspapers, magazines, or governmental publications where people could actually express what they thought or information. And average people did not actually have the access to whatever publications. They did not have the place to sort of show their opinion in the public. But with the arrival of the internet, and especially with the SNS, they actually felt that they finally had gained this access to the platform. So this is a sort of popularization of the discursive space. But unfortunate thing, I think, is that with this arrival of SNS, while we think that the public was visualized, we became realized that public actually had opinions and ideas and so forth, but they are as Jakob was talking about echo chamber effect. They are actually within the filter bubble, and what the people are perceiving in front of them are actually only the opinion within filter bubbles. And so, it became really difficult to realize that there are different types of opinions or different types of discussions going on within the Twitter space, even if you do not get to see it. So I think that's a sort of difficult part.
And that is reinforced by algorithms, which we do not have control over, which I think is an interesting discussion as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, and speaking of algorithm, I want to turn this topic into the, development of AI, and especially ChatGPT, because it's, spread it exponentially, and, it's affecting our life. I'm wondering whether this has the if you have any ethical concerns over it, and also whether that should be regulated, because when maybe I can talk about this analogy about the car. When the car was first developed or invented, you can actually learn to drive, and it doesn't matter how old you are or whether you have a driver's license or not, because there was no such things existed. But now people realize that it could be a very, very dangerous tool. So that we agree that we should have a license, or maybe seatbelt or airbags. There are certain regulations and laws, rules were installed. In terms of this, what do you think the ChatGPT or AI, and is it possible for governments to regulate that? What do you think? Anybody? Rauno, would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the possibilities and challenges and even threats of the ChatGPT is also discussed here a lot. I haven't tried it yet by myself, but when I told to my colleague that I'm going to take part in this discussion, he sent me as a joke a text created by the ChatGPT and using the keywords democracy, technology, and Finland. And I must say that yes, it was full of cliches, but it didn't include any big mistakes. So the ChatGPT seems to know very well that we highlight the rule of law, accountability, transparency, dialogues, digital literacy, and so forth. So, but after all consideration, I decided to use my own little brains and I hope that you are fine with that. But more seriously, we cannot separate every single solution from each other. So the legislation must treat equally all and be predictable, and our policy must be balanced so that it also enables technological development, but at the same time, of course, respect all fundamental and human rights. So I don't think that there will be any that kind of legal restrictions for that system so far. What comes to the safety belt, so I think that we already have them quite a lot when we think about the international human rights conventions covering also the digital world and different policies. Of course, we have to improve these things, and there are many things ongoing. For instance, here in Europe by the Council of Europe and the European Union as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, right. That International Human Rights Convention is a very good point. I think that whether it is a digital space or real space, I think the rule of law should be applied to the same kind of concept. So thank you very much for reminding us. Would you like to talk about it, or
Absolutely. Sorry, I think this is a fascinating and somewhat scary subject. You could say, as I said in the beginning, adding internet and smartphones and AI, lumping that together, you could absolutely say that we're in an industrial revolution, taking us to a new level. And normally I would say that technology is neutral, it's how you use it. But when I think about it, AI, I hope it's going to stay neutral, actually, because what we hear now more and more from those who are actually developing AI, which is essentially private companies, huge private companies with quite limited government influence. Well, you could argue that all technological revolutions comes from inventors and companies, but they themselves are starting to talk about, well, maybe we need a 6 months moratorium. I saw an op-ed recently in The Economist saying that we need an international agency regulating the use of AI, just as we in the 1950s agreed on the International Atomic Energy Agency, because where this is going is scary. And that is from the people who are developing this. And that makes me a little bit worried, because when you talk about legislation, I mean, as democracies, what we care about is, of course, personal integrity, human rights, using it to protect our citizens. Maybe the International Human Rights Conventions is enough as a legal instrument. Maybe not, because the authoritarian states, I'm quite sure, will want to use AI, because that's what they've done with internet, to repress, to surveil, and maybe to track dissidents and control political thinking. So I think we are at quite an interesting threshold at the moment, and this is also a debate that is happening in Sweden right now. There's been several op-eds about this, about researchers who joined this call for a moratorium, to just sit down and think what's actually happening. So there's absolutely ethical and moral questions here, and maybe more so than when we got railroads or mass production and internet only. I don't know. Maybe I'm scaremongering, but this is clearly issues we need to look very closely at.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you. Totally. Well, for authoritarian actors, they are interested in conducting surveillance to their citizens, and thus, how to get the citizens' data has been an issue for them, and that has been one of the reasons why, for example, China has been exporting AI surveillance technology to other countries. So far, more than 80 countries have received China's AI technology, surveillance technologies for surveillance. And this has been conducted proactively, but with the arrival of ChatGPT, even without installing those surveillance technologies and proactively trying to get people's private information, private people themselves actually insert their information to conduct a search in ChatGPT, and there is a possibility that those private information actually gets leaked unintentionally by other people, or maybe intentionally, can make them make the ChatGPT leak those private information. So there is a really serious sort of change in terms of how we can protect human rights in this era. And I think one additional sort of interesting aspect in here is how these ChatGPT type of AI technology can be utilized to counter authoritarian actors. For example, China has been blocking the use of ChatGPT, being afraid that ChatGPT might talk about the Tiananmen Square incident or whatever repression that the government has been conducting.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I think that would actually the authoritarian regime like China would probably do more regulation maybe on the ChatGPT. But for the rest of us, I think that the education also, plays a very, very important role. Actually, our time is running out. But I'd like to just touch upon the role of education so that we can actually counter those negatives. What do you think, maybe Jacob?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I think education is paramount, and more precisely, source criticism. We all learned about that at school. Primary sources, secondary sources, what do we trust? And with AI, I think that it's becoming more acute, because fakes and deep fakes and whatever it's called are becoming more and more difficult to distinguish. So maybe we should even recall to ourselves about the 16 cognitive biases that and which of them we're challenging with most each of us. So I think this is incredibly important. And maybe the echo chambers, I think we tend to forget that we all live in our respective filter bubbles and echo chambers reinforced by those darn algorithms, maybe challenging ourselves to remember that, maybe leaving them. So all of that, more precisely, I think is important when it comes to education. And it should start in primary school, because who is using this the most, and who is, the younger generations are better and better at using this.
Thank you very much. Rauno, would you like to comment on the education, the role of education?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. This is really something we have paid attention to. We are a small nation, and that's why we need the people and also young generation who is skilled and highly educated. Um, and maybe here the thing is that we shall offer high level education, including digital and media literacy, to all children. So also to those who are the most vulnerable situations. So they could be also some way more vulnerable to mis and disinformation as well. So this is something we really have to look at. As Jacob mentioned, this kind of phenomenon-based education is some way taking more room also in Finnish classrooms. So the children and youth are encouraged to seek information themselves, and they must be critical. And we believe that this is also the good way to some way to combat disinformation as well. But again, the right to education belongs to all children, and we have to offer the high level education to all children to be successful. Thank you.
You, Michael?
Sure. Well, in addition to what two of you talked about, I would also say that the young generation is actually digital natives, while we are not. And so we also have to learn from them, and we also have to try to work with them, not as an unequal partner between them and us, but as an equal, or maybe superior partner. I'm not sure, but that's one thing. And what we have to do, I think, includes not only literacy education is very important, primary important. And after then, we also have to think about fact checking of disinformation and misinformation. And yet fact-checked articles actually does not travel well, because it gets stuck into the filter bubble. And also, oftentimes it talks a lot about truth and facts, while it does not convey so much emotion in it. And so I think we, the people in the democratic societies, have to think about really how to create counter narratives, which goes against those authoritarian actors, domestically and internationally, that are trying to create this narrative which harms democratic values and norms. And for that sake, I think young generation also has something to add as well. We together can analyze what kind of targets those authoritarian actors are trying to influence, and with what kind of methods they are trying to do so. And by understanding those things, we can think about what kind of counter narratives would work the best. And that's how we can actually talk about the virtues of human rights, democracy, and peace.
Thank you very much. It's analyzing is a very, very important point. Like, especially we need maybe help from your academia, and that would be nice. And also, cooperation among internationally, interstate cooperation as well. I think it could be also helpful. Okay, I'd like to actually I need to open the floor for the question, and maybe I can just save the final comments from you, each of you, for after the question, so that actually you can, talk about call for action later on. So just be ready for that. So in the meantime, now it's time for question. We'd like to open the floor for question. If you have any question, please raise your hand, and I think the staff will bring you a microphone. And also, please tell whom you wanted to address your question to. Okay, the gentleman over there.
Thank you very much. It was a great opportunity to listen to all of you. I have one question. It's about how to deal with the centralization of the digital technology, like how to counter surveillance. I think using the digital technology, especially focusing on the citizen side, I think it's important to make the decentralized system or the technology. And I think this decentralization it's a keyword for for example, a blockchain. And I think it's a buzzword, but I think it's quite useful. So my question is how do you think is this kind of a blockchain technology can take part in making the digital interaction more decentralized? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who would you like to answer? Okay, maybe.
Well,
Jakob?
actually, I don't understand blockchain fully, so I don't know exactly. But I know it's a powerful tool. And I do agree with you that decentralization is, of course, good in the face of a government or a state that want to centralize information or data about persons, if that is possible. However, too much decentralization and handing that over to the private company could also include risks. So I think it depends a little bit on the context. Maybe in a highly and strongly democratic society with good and functioning legislation for GDPR, as we have in Europe, for instance, then I think it's only for the better. And actually instilling that, was it you, Rauno, who talked about trust? And I think actually the private actors are acutely aware of that trust is necessary, because when we're supposed to hand over so incredibly much data about ourselves, we need to rely on that it will not be misused. In the authoritarian states, that's probably a much bigger problem. But
Rauno, you mentioned about surveillance. Would you like to comment on this question?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe first jump into the question with blockchains. And as Jacob, I'm not really an expert on that, but what we have discussed so far has been there's maybe two things, and one is about the possibility to using this crypto or currency in supporting human rights defenders in such situations where they must some way hide the sources of their finances from the authoritarian repressive regimes. I think that would not be possible because our system is so open, and there must be a public scrutiny of how we are using, for instance, the public money. And we know that there is also a remarkable risk for using this crypto system for criminal purposes. What comes to the surveillance, well, we know that in all societies, maybe there are more things which are some way possibly, if not violating the right to privacy, but some way in a gray zone. And our system is that at the same time, when the authorities have more power to somewhere in surveillance in the internet, we have also developed the parliamentarian scrutiny over these authorities. So there is a parliamentary committee, etc., etc. So there's this kind of check and balances there as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, if I may, yeah.
Sure.
Well, just to it's a bit of digression, but well, I really liked your comments about importance of truth. Well, going back to what Jacob, you talked about in the very beginning, well, and also probably Rauno talked about it as well. We also have to think about the interconnection between the digital world and the physical world, and the importance of working on the both scenes. And when we think about how to strengthen trust between the people, one sort of thing which has been preventing us from, generating trust is the fact that on SNS, when we see others, we tend to see sort of specifications about others, like what kind of political beliefs they have, what kind of background they have, what they say, kind of things. But when you are together with your friends, people around yourself physically, you don't actually judge people in that way. You would naturally talk with them, if they are your neighbor, your schoolmate, or your roommate, what have you. And even when your political belief is different from them, you would try to, generate trust. So I think, in addition to maintaining this, online discursive space, we also have to, invigorate, vitalize the physical sort of discursive space as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, gentleman over here, Akasaka-san.
Thank you. Thank you, Daimon-san, and I've been fascinated by the discussions on this subject. I agree with the idea that the SNS and AI have positive effects on democracy and our social and political systems. But I would rather like to be a devil's advocate. Look at the Arab Spring in 2011. People said that started with the people using Twitter. They used Twitter effectively and succeeded in throwing out dictators. But what happened then? The Twitter's message was just to get rid of him, get rid of the dictators, but not the ideas about what to do after the collapse of the regime. What happened to Russia, China, North Korea right now? Do you think that SNS has had any positive effects on the minds of Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un for that matter? The effects may be overestimated. Positive effects are there, but limited. Can you tell us what good example the SNS has played in a big way? If I may, I would also like to say that as far as the ChatGPT is concerned, the effects of ChatGPT have been perhaps treated overcautiously. If you use it for translation, for example, ChatGPT has got more than 100 foreign languages to help you to translate your messages. It's useful. And I think people are talking about regulations and so on. Don't you think that it's rather too early to start regulating this new development? I just see more positive sides of AI, and this year seemed to be the beginning of the revolutionary use of AI. Thank you.
Thank you for the good question. Who would you like? Maybe Michael?
Sure. Yeah. Well, let me talk about the democratization and SNS aspect. Well, that's really correct. That SNS does not necessarily democratize countries, so we should not overestimate the power of SNS. I totally agree with you. I think when we think about democratization per se, we probably have to think about two aspects. One is how to make change and how to stabilize a new political regime. And then when we go back to democratization theories, for example, the existing literature talks that those countries with the past experience of democratization tend to succeed in consolidating democracy. So that means that people actually have to have this culture and history of, implementing democracy on their own. And I believe that for Middle Eastern countries like Tunisia, they did not have those experiences. And so that's how it was difficult for them to actually consolidate democracy. What's going on in Tunisia right now is pretty sad. That has been also the case in many other countries, but we probably should not give up the hope that with having the trial and error, they would naturally, get to learn how to run their countries, govern their countries. And when it especially comes to Asia, I think, myself has been thinking about this importance of how to educate people or how to make people aware that public sphere is not something that the government or the top officials would give to you, but something that people create amongst themselves. In Asia, and in those Confucius, cultures, we tend to have this idea that public sphere is something that, public is something that the government would give you. So you would just obey the rules or obey whatever things that the government provides. But that will create a huge gap in the, governing space. And so even if they successfully mobilize people and democratize, they don't know how to actually run the country. So we have to make people really aware that people themselves are the ones to run, the localities, the countries, and governance. So the ownership, I believe, is very important.
Okay, would you?
Thank you for excellent and interesting questions. Well, I think that it's important to distinguish things here. I don't think any one of us have argued, or anyone would argue, that social media will change human character or the course of revolutions. Many revolutions start with one unifying call, and that is to depose of the ruler. And then what comes after is very often not thought through, long before Twitter and long after Twitter and SNS. So I think it's important to put this in proportion and not blame this particular tool for the lack of success or democratic consequences or follow-up of the Arab Spring. However, I actually do think that digitalization, SNS, etc., affects the authoritarian states quite a lot. Just to think of how they are shielding themselves from the dangerous ideas of, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and freedom to criticize your rulers. I mean, they are becoming more and more closed. China is closing itself from the outside, internet world for a reason, and they are adapting. Just think of North Korea. They don't want these even balloons with human rights messages. So I think, they feel that they are under pressure, and the digital instruments are, I think, part of that. This doesn't mean that it will change all. It doesn't mean that they won't counteract, and quite strongly so. And then on your final point, is it too early to regulate ChatGPT and AI, etc.? I think that's a very pertinent point, and I think many are arguing that it is indeed too early because we do not yet foresee the consequences of it. When I said that before, I quoted those who are developing it, and those guys should know the best, right? And if they are worried, I become worried. But maybe in the future, AI will make us turn us all into peace-loving Democrats, so we don't need to bother about this. But we're not there yet, I think.
Thank you very much. Rauno, would you like to comment?
Thank you. I think the gentleman is right. So the internet and social media has shown its strengths in revealing corruption and wrongdoings by the political and economic elites merely than some way supporting to create different tools for deliberative democracy. And as Jacob said, the authoritarian politicians and regimes, they are very cautious of that kind of situation, that the critics against them can be increased, and it could be somewhere also to lead to democratic reforms. But what we have to do is really to look at that, how we can some way also the design and use these kind of digital tools to some way to improve the deliberative democracy and public consultations for democracy and so forth. What comes to the regulation, I think that somewhere Europe is here a norm setter. The one example is the drafting of the Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence, Human Rights and Rule of Law, etc., by the Council of Europe. So most likely, there is a draft, but most likely the adoption will be a long road. But my guess is that there will be a legally binding convention, and that will be adopted in coming years. And as you maybe know, the Council of Europe conventions are also open to the non-members of the Council. And for instance, Japan has ratified the so-called Budapest Convention to combat cyber crimes. So that could be also one thing that is oncoming. So this convention is about maybe more about some way rules that how to use artificial intelligence than the how to prohibit its use. And also the European Union has adopted the so-called Digital Service Act, some way controlling the power of the big tech companies, so and making them more responsible of the conduct they are sharing to the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your Europe's information. That is really educating for us. It's we have a lot. Okay, maybe lady over there.
Maybe I can just speak loud.
I think there's an online audience, so maybe it's better to speak.
All right, thank you all so much for your insights today. So my question is, I'm wondering if in your circles there's talk of data, it's like DFFT, data free flow with trust. The reason I'm asking is because the G7, as the tech ambassador was mentioning before, is almost upon us, the tech ministerial meeting here in Japan. And Digital Minister Kono has mentioned that one of the most important issues for Japan and data security is this DFFT concept, in which countries that participate will align their data security standards so that there can be freer cross-border information flow, leading to all sorts of maybe interesting use cases, such as digital passports or maybe digital wallets that can go cross-border. And so because I think in right now Japanese politics, and this idea came from former Prime Minister Abe originally, but Japan is very interested in leading and taking this idea forward in, I guess, the service of peace and democracy. If this is something that you all are hearing about in your circles, or I would just be curious to hear about that if you have any insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you, Rauno, maybe you can talk about it, especially, Europe, you're in the government, so you might be aware of this discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not a specialist in this particular issue, So but not so much information what comes to this DFFT itself, but in general. So we hope to some way to have that kind of international law which is applicable in globally or regionally. So not only some way restricting to the democratic country itself, but of course there must be more political cooperation, and we hope also that the G7 countries are and can contact with all democratic elected countries like the Nordic countries are to somewhere to promote the to trust in democratic institutions and democratically working digitalization. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you very much.
I don't know about it, but I think it relates to cyber regulations and GDPR, as I mentioned before, which is the data protection initiative in Europe, which protects individuals. But I was not aware of this particular initiative. But it sounds great to kind of join the parts of the world where we care about these issues. But maybe you know more.
That's not my area either, so I don't follow. But DF and DFFT is indeed one of the most important topics for the Japanese government, especially after the Abe administration, since the Abe administration, and the control of the data flow in access to privacy information issues are very important, especially because the control of flow of items across borders have been done by the World Trade Organizations so far, and WTO has been having only these two pillars of regulating service flow and also regulating the location origin of the services, products. And they do not control non-material products. So DF and DFFT is indeed one of the very important topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, next question. Okay, lady over there.
Okay, thank you. My name is Yuriko Sugahara. I come from the Graduate School of Social Science at Hitotsubashi University. And although technology is not my area of expertise, I have one question as a young individual living in Japan. So all the other questions before concern the global sphere, but I would like to zoom in on Japan. And as you mentioned, there are as people living in the digital technology world, we need to include old people in this society. And I believe that's really important for Japan because Japan itself is an aging society, as we all know. So in relation to that, what are some practical methods, policies that we can implement in Japan? Because the reason I'm asking is because I believe that Japan can learn from the Nordic countries in this domain. And so I would like to hear your thoughts on how both Japan can learn in implementing old people and learning from young people. Thank you.
Michael, maybe can you answer this question?
I can't. I can't answer. I don't know. But let me just focus on a different aspect. Well, indeed, how to help the old people and the methods to do that should be probably thought differently from the approach to the younger people. Well, probably the combination of digital technology and physical support system would be very much important, I think. One of the reasons why I believe that way is when the Japanese municipal governments, officials, offices implemented this vaccine reservation platforms in Japan. Many of the municipalities actually created only online platforms and did not provide offline sort of way of making reservations in the first place. That caused a lot of problems for the older generation, and they got panicked and they, flocked together to municipalities and then tried to make reservations. But the flocking was actually counter, positive for in avoiding infection. And so in order to avoid that, there should have been much more like phone line reservation system along with online reservation system, so that older people actually can choose between them.
We need to maybe keep the 2-track system, and also maybe each like young individual can maybe help the older people, Yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry. Actually, the time is running out, so that would be that was the final question, and I'm sure some of the panelists will probably hang around after this. So maybe if you have any questions, please ask them directly. Finally, I'd like to come back to you, each panelist, so that you can have a final say, and also maybe please talk about your action for future, and also what each person can do for this peace, for peace and democracy in daily life. Start with Jakob.
Well, thank you. I will be brief, and building on what I said before. I think this is an incredibly important and fantastic development where we need to embrace the opportunities of the digitalization and really go out and use and develop, because this is happening. It's in the making as we speak, but we need to be aware of the risks. And I'm coming back to source criticism, challenging your echo chambers, and remembering the cognitive biases. That's my call to action.
Thank you very much. And Rauno?
Yeah, thank you. So I used my small brains and turned to my good friends Moomins. So you maybe know these well-known characters by Finnish writer and illustrator Tuve Jansson. So they have a so-called ABC campaign to promote the power of words, and I quote here what the campaign says. So being able to express yourself is one of the most important things in the world. It allows you to communicate your hopes and dreams, relate you to the others, engage with big issues of our times, and create change. So in addition to, quote and end it, so in addition to public events, these moving characters have started cooperation with PEN International, UNICEF, Oxfam, and the others, and they have started to create a range of downloaded resources that parents and guardians and teachers and business can use. So I really welcome you all to visit their website. You can use the keywords Moomin and ABC. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Sure. Well, the current situation right now in the entire world is very much concerning for the democracy, for the democratic societies. A lot of coups are happening, a lot of election interference are happening, populists are mobilizing the people, and it's becoming very difficult to understand what's the truth. And in this world, SNS has been making a very difficult and negative impact in a sense that their attention economy model is making those platforms spread or untouch disinformation and extreme sort of contents going viral, and thus those extreme things go viral, and if some extreme crime happens, and that goes viral, and some coup happens somewhere, that goes viral, some stupid people appear, then that goes viral. That's making each issue's attention span really, really short. And so I think we really have to think how to keep the attention on each very important topics. And in Europe, I think, well, you have this, Russian aggression into Ukraine right now, which is such a big topic to cover. And so Europe is doing a really great job in, shedding light on this. Then well, I think we have to think about what to do in Asia. Well, we actually have this Hong Kong losing, freedom, Myanmar losing freedom, Thailand, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, and well, so almost all those countries are suffering a lot. And we Asians are the ones to shed light on what's going on in those countries, not only in Ukraine and Russia or European what's going on in Europe.
Thank you very much. It's a very important point. We really enjoyed the discussion with you and also with the exchange with the audience. Thank you very much. Let's hope that we can make a better world with the digital technology. And I think that after all, that we humans are the one who created this technology, and so that it's all up to us whether we can make this technology useful for our future. Thank you very much. And please give a big round of applause to the panelists. Thank you very much.
So, sorry, also from myself, I will just take the floor like this.
Thank you very much.
I'm the ambassador of Finland to Japan, and on behalf of all the Nordic embassies, I would like to offer the closing remarks to this session. It was really a very stimulating discussion, very rich of content, and really difficult to wrap up, but maybe just to offer some personal observations and a few takeaways from today's discussion. So 3-4 points. First, I'd like to say that digital development is evident. And actually, there's no reason or no possibility to stop it either. So it is also true that digital development is essential in reaching the sustainable societies and the SDGs, including the goal of universal internet access by 2030. But we need to actively promote a human-centered approach to digital development, build on the foundation of human rights, democratic values, and security of citizens. And the Nordic countries and Japan, we are like-minded countries, like the Danish tech ambassador said in her keynote speech. And perhaps together we could leverage our bridge building role also in the future to shape the global digital rules and standards, for example, in the areas of AI, 6G, and why not also an online rule book. Secondly, I really liked your car analogy and the safety belts. And here I think it's good to remember that it actually took quite a lot of time to make people to understand why the rules, these regulations were made in the first place. It was for the safety of the people. And understanding this actually took quite a lot of time, and the education and sensitization of public was really important. So in the digital environment, I think it's really the same. Digital literacy is of important and needs to be addressed. So it's not maybe not so much about regulation, but education. Also to understand that we need some sort of guidelines and instructions to make ourselves more secure. So for that, I think new models of multi-stakeholder collaborations are also needed. So we need private sector, we need academia, and we need the civil society to work together with governments naturally. We didn't talk so much about private sector, but it's important to recognize their role in promoting the digital inclusion and ethics in the digital sphere as well. And my third point is about the trust and the digitalization. This was raised by several of you today, and it is true that the Nordic countries are the forerunners of the DX. And that I believe that is also based on the trust we have on our authorities and the authorities' trust in the people as well. But here we also need to collaborate, not only the public sector, but the private sector as well. So we need each other in building this trust, and maybe this is one of the action points also for the future, that we can work with Japan and to help each other on this. And my final point is that really today's civic space online is an integral part of the civic space in general. And the forms and it forms really a cornerstone of accountable, inclusive and responsive democratic societies. And this was referred to many of the panelists today, that we need the digital space for our civil society to express themselves and to be influential as well. So now we have come to the end of our event, and I really would like to thank all on the stage today. Wonderful moderator, Ms. Sayuri Diamond. I'd like to thank our tech ambassador for the online keynote speech, and our lovely panelists, Michael, Rauno, and Jakob. Really wonderful job. I would like to thank also the Nordic Innovation House for this continuous cooperation with the Nordic talks. I would like to thank the Nordic Council of Ministers for making this possible. And finally, I would like to thank our partners at the University of Creativity. Thank you for lending us your expertise and offering us this wonderful space again together today. So it was really great pleasure to have you all here on site and online. I would like to warmly thank you for your active participation. And those who have happened to be here on site, I would like to invite you all to the small reception after this event. Thank you so much. Good night.